Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I've been working at Thompson's Home Depot for almost a decade now, around 9 years. The first 7 were in North Carolina before I relocated further north to live with my best friend Sarah and her husband Mike, who were expecting their first child, my godchild. So, I transferred to a store nearby and worked hard. I started in the garden department for a few months before getting shifted around as the store was understaffed. However, it wasn't full-time. My old HR had messed up, and this store thought I wanted part-time. Having already moved, I took a part-time overnight job at a fitness center to make ends meet while repeatedly requesting full-time at my main job, but never got a clear answer. Several months later, my goddaughter Emma was born. Living with Sarah and Mike during COVID, I spent a lot of time helping raise Emma, and we became close. I'd take allotted time off to help with her, with no major issues. Half a year after the move, I had built a good reputation for my work ethic and willingness to assist anyone in any department. Enter the new assistant manager, Jessica. She was abrasive with staff and used to getting her way. The first I heard of her was when she fired a girl at the front desk over a Playboy tag on her jacket. Several of us organized a walkout, and the store manager reversed Jessica's decision. It wasn't our first walkout, as we had done it before when a previous assistant manager made sexist remarks about a cashier. Soon after, I was given full-time in receiving by the operations manager, working for a difficult supervisor, Tom. We often clashed, especially as Emma grew older and I babysat her while Sarah and Mike worked and slept. I loved that kid and talked about her with coworkers, showing pictures. However, my higher-ups didn't share that sentiment. Tom was upset I couldn't work overtime because of my second job or babysitting. After the second walkout, I learned of a rumor circulating that Emma was my daughter, and I had fathered her secretly. While the source was unknown, Jessica had made disparaging remarks to me about men caring for children, so I had suspicions. My pre-approved holiday plans for Thanksgiving and Christmas were canceled without explanation. I had never missed a major holiday since moving north, and the previous year's requests had been approved before Jessica arrived, strike one. Soon after, Tom tested positive for COVID, forcing me to self-isolate until I could get tested per company rules. During that week, as Omicron made testing scarce, I was harassed repeatedly by texts and calls from management and Tom to find an at-home test and return ASAP. I had to inform everyone I was in contact with, including Sarah, Mike, and my roommates, risking their holiday plans. Strike two. Thankfully, my test was negative. A week later, the Northeast was hit by a snowstorm. I made it to work in my truck, but near the end of my shift, I learned Mike had been in a car accident on the ice and was stranded. With their power out and an infant at home, I was the only one they could turn to with a vehicle and electricity. I informed work of the ongoing family emergency, calling out each day that week as the snow and ice persisted and power remained out. Every day I was bombarded with calls from management demanding I return, risking my safety and stranding Sarah, Mike, and Emma at my apartment. Strike three. I had enough. That Sunday morning, I handed in my resignation letter to HR, effective immediately, as I live in an at-will state. Petty? Yes. I had given 8 years to this company and asked for little in return. As I left, I ran into Tom, who angrily asked if I was finally coming back. I informed him of my resignation, ignoring his provocations. Hours later, I received a gift that ignited my accidental revenge. A text from Jessica. "We'll see how long you can take care of your love child without us." Bingo. I had likely found my source. Sarah and Mike were aware of the rumor from the start, and I had been upfront with them. They're my closest friends, and Emma is like a niece to me. Love child felt like a slur against her, which they agreed with. However, they informed me of Jessica's monumental mistake. It was time to involve corporate HR, so I compiled evidence, texts from Tom, call records, messages, and Jessica's text message. What happened next is secondhand from friends still at the store, so I can't verify everything. But Jessica played herself. The following day, at a management meeting, Jessica claimed I had been fired for job abandonment and immorality. As far as I know, immorality isn't grounds for termination in retail. To Tom's credit, he defended me, and Jessica fired him on the spot. The store's HR rep, having received my printed resignation letter, clarified that I had quit, not been fired. Jessica then tried firing him too, in front of staff. From there, it spiraled. Entire departments began walking out or quitting over issues with Jessica. Appliances, quit en masse. Garden, left with their manager for a competitor. Front desk walked out after learning Jessica had threatened Muslim part-timers over wearing headscarves. Lumber and receiving's partner departments quit. Pro desk joined the front desk protest as a Sikh employee had also been threatened. Cashiers, both head cashiers quit and others walked with the desks. Operations manager informed the district manager, then quit with the HR rep and Tom. My source's last sight of Jessica was her sprinting to her car after learning district staff was coming. The store manager had to shut down for 2 days. I've been in contact with other affected parties, and we're compiling evidence as several families hire lawyers. The company will likely try to keep this quiet. I have a full-time position at the gym upcoming and have been enjoying the extra time with family. Never again will I work 56, 64-hour weeks. I'll never set foot in that store again. I hope Jessica enjoyed her temporary power trip because I doubt she'll get another manager role anytime soon. The next one is an entitled people story. When my wife and I bought our cozy little house in the suburbs, we thought we were settling into a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Boy, were we wrong. It all started when we got a notice in the mail about a new homeowners association being formed. Apparently, some of the residents thought it would be beneficial to have a homeowner association to maintain things like the local park and organize community events. We didn't think much of it at first. I mean, how bad could it be, right? Well, pretty damn bad, as it turns out. It began with them going around pressuring everyone to pay homeowner association dues and sign some sort of agreement. A few nosy neighbors came knocking on our door going on and on about how an homeowner association would increase our property values. They just wouldn't take no for an answer. When we declined to sign up, they got quite offended. Said we were being uncooperative and letting the neighborhood down. Yeah, right. I didn't take too kindly to them trying to guilt trip us like that. A few weeks later, I started noticing some people lurking around our house, seeming to inspect it. When I confronted them, they claimed the homeowner association had appointed them to check for any code violations. Apparently, things like the color of our exterior paint and our lawn decorations were unacceptable according to their new homeowner association rules. Before I could even wrap my head around this nonsense, I got a letter in the mail threatening to fine us if we didn't change the paint color and remove our cute garden gnomes. Can you believe the audacity? That's when I decided enough was enough. I called up my buddy Ted, who's a real estate attorney. He informed me that because we never signed any homeowner association agreement, these jokers had no authority over our property. I marched right over to the homeowner association president's house and gave that old hag a piece of my mind, told her to take her threats and shove them where the sun don't shine. Well, she didn't take too kindly to that, got real flustered and called me a non-conformist rebel, like that's supposed to be an insult. Just when my wife and I thought we had nipped the problem in the bud, things somehow managed to escalate. One Saturday morning, we woke up to the sound of construction right outside our window. I rush outside to find a bunch of homeowner association lackeys building a fence around our house. When I started yelling at them to stop, the homeowner association president waddled over and announced that they would be converting our home into the new homeowner association clubhouse. Apparently, their old clubhouse was being demolished to make way for some new development, so they decided our cute little house was a perfect replacement. I was absolutely fuming at this point. Not only were they trying to seize our property, they were stupid enough to think I'd just let them convert my home into their little hangout spot. I immediately called the cops to report the illegal trespassing and construction. The homeowner association. Goons tried convincing the cops that I had donated my home for a good cause. Yeah, right. The cops weren't buying their BS though. Made them halt the construction and vacate my property pronto. You'd think this insanity would end there, but these homeowner association nutjobs just didn't know when to quit. The very next day, a moving truck shows up outside our home. I watch in disbelief as a group of people start unloading boxes and furniture, getting ready to move into my house. When I demanded to know what in blazes they were doing, they presented me with some bogus contract claiming I had agreed to a house swap with the homeowner association president. The sneaky old bat had forged my signature on a fake deed transfer document. This was the last straw for me. I wasted no time in gathering evidence and putting these crooks in their place for good. My buddy Ted helped me file a lawsuit against the homeowner association president and board for illegal seizure of property, trespassing, and fraud. I also submitted the fake documents to the cops to have that old crone arrested for forgery. Let's just say I had a solid case, and the homeowner association clowns didn't stand a chance. During the hearing, I presented ironclad evidence of their underhanded tactics. The judge was appalled by their actions, calling it a disgraceful misuse of power. Long story short, the homeowner association was ordered to cease operations and disband immediately. The president and her minions got slapped with hefty fines, and that forged deed got tossed straight into the shredder where it belonged. Justice was sweet. My wife and I popped open a bottle of champagne to celebrate our victory that night. We may have lost a few months of peace and quiet, but at least those homeowner association crooks aren't going to be bothering anyone in the neighborhood anymore. I still keep Ted on speed dial, though, in case those nuts try anything again. But for now, I'm just happy to have my quiet little home back, free from the greedy grasp of the homeowner association. The next one is a petty revenge story. My ex-husband was a problem. I didn't mind the myriad of health conditions he had, but the fact that he refused to take care of himself was the real issue, especially when his problems caused me to lose the very little sleep I was going to get. I worked for a terrible corporate security firm that really doesn't care about its employees. I was the single field supervisor in my region, and on top of my regular 40-hour work week, I also was called on emergency to fill open positions. This was during the height of COVID as well, which eventually put me at a regular 80, 100 hours per 7-day work week. The money was incredible, but I was miserably exhausted. At the time, my husband was working part-time and receiving SSI and spending all of his income on himself, video games and fast food, against his doctor's orders, while I paid both of our shares of the bills, car payment, insurance, phones, etc. This went on for about 3 years, getting progressively worse as time went on. Despite the amount of money I covered for him, I still managed to bump my credit by paying off my car and saved enough to buy a house. Nothing too fancy, but it's a 2-story with an unfinished basement, plenty of space, decent-sized yard, creek, and really cool neighbors who constantly invite us over to drink and play pool. While moving, I was still working 80-plus hours and couldn't spare time to help much, but I paid for the moving truck and dinner for anyone willing to help us pack up and move. I asked my then-husband to make sure everything gets packed. He packed all of his own belongings, then the household furniture, then ignored whatever didn't fit, was late returning the moving truck, and I had to call about the fee, which they were very kind enough to waive considering my circumstances. The result was that the majority of my stuff, my roommate's stuff, and my brother's stuff didn't fit in the moving truck. My brother was making trips every day after work to pick up a carload and bring it home. I asked my ex-husband to please do the same, and he agreed. 3 weeks later, I finally got a day off. I worked a 12-hour shift and planned to go pack up a few boxes and take them home while I was out. I walked into the house and saw that my ex had literally done nothing. 3 weeks, he said he had been moving our stuff and he hadn't touched a thing. I had a meltdown. My legs gave out from shock and I sobbed on the stairs. My roommate and best friend happened to also come in right after me and found me on the stairs. He held me while I cried and assured me he would take a few days off to get everything packed up and moved. He told me to go home and sleep, but I told him I'm already here, so I might as well take a few boxes since my worthless husband lied to me about doing so. He helped me pack up some things and I drove home. I didn't even bother to unload it. I went inside and collapsed on my bed and cried myself to sleep. Hours and hours later, I finally woke up, a groggy mess, and made my way out to my car to start unloading. Best friend was there unloading his own car with a tired smile. He had been going all day and the sun was setting. Meanwhile, my husband was slacking off in the basement doing who knows what, breaking his promise. We managed to get everything moved, but I had to extend the lease by 1 week and pay a prorated rental cost, all due to my husband's neglect. I was quickly racking up anger at him, and finally, when we were moved, I sat him down and told him how angry I was about the lies and his laziness and what he caused. He started accusing me of all kinds of things in return, like how I wouldn't passionately hug him because of his medical issues. I lost it. I screamed at him that I don't passionately hug anyone. I don't even passionately hug myself, because I'm working the equivalent of 2 jobs with overtime to support his lazy butt and pay for his lifestyle because he wastes all of his money on fast food that he shouldn't even be eating in video games, and because he doesn't lift a single finger to do anything around the house, like unpacking, cooking, cleaning. Nothing to make my life easier. In fact, he is actively making my life harder. I'm still cleaning up after him when he leaves dishes everywhere and stains in my carpet. So no, I don't want to passionately hug him if he's not going to do anything to earn it. He went radio silent on me for 2 weeks. It got progressively worse. He wouldn't text me or speak to me, wouldn't answer my calls, and eventually wouldn't even look at me. Meanwhile, he's still living off my money. So finally one day I message him to ask him why he's treating me this way, and he ignores me. I ask several other questions, nothing. Finally, I tell him that if he hates me so much, he should just divorce me. He tells me the next day he wants a divorce. I ask him why. You're not going to believe his answer. You don't do enough for me. Oh boy, did he mess up. I tell you, this ding-dong is the absolute most obtuse, smooth-brained, intellectually deficient, situationally unaware, half-witted, opossum-brained clod to say that. I unleashed it. I told him that I do everything for him. I pay for everything so he can live the cushy life. I give him a roof over his head, food in his belly, money in his bank account, because at this point I was also giving him extra money whenever he asked, and taking days off specifically to spend time with him, that I was doing absolutely everything for him, and this is the repayment I get. I got extremely quiet and bucked into his chest, pointing my finger at his face, and told him that since he wanted the divorce, he had to file, and if he even suggested at forcing me to sell my house that I paid for, I would destroy him. I would hire an expensive lawyer, force him into the longest court battle of his life, and take him for every single penny he would ever earn for the rest of his life along with court costs. Then I kicked him out. He moved out. He told me he was moving in with his family a few cities over and asked me to file. I filed in my county because it was closest. He raged at me when he found out. He wanted me to file online and pay an extra $270 out of my pocket since he expected me to pay for the entire thing, and I told him no. A few days later, I got a strange text from him that didn't sound like him. I argued with him. Then a confession was made. It was his girlfriend. He had lied to me again and moved to New York from Georgia. She went psycho on me and screamed at me via text about how abusive I am. Long story short, we argued and I told her I wouldn't be speaking to her again. I am filing in my county because I already started the process, and I'm not changing my mind because he lied to me. If he hadn't lied, I might have been willing to file online, but I'm definitely not now. Months go by and finally the date comes. She drove him to Georgia and they were 15 minutes late. I knew this because I was 15 minutes early and the clerk asked if I could contact him, so I went outside to do so. I saw her roll up. I told him she's not allowed inside due to COVID restrictions, but honestly I wouldn't have let her inside because I hate her. He nodded and up we went. We spoke to the clerk and started our paperwork. I have some legal knowledge, definitely a ton more than him, due to curiosity and things that have happened to me in the past, so I knew which questions to ask. I know how lazy this brat of a human is. He hates doing anything he doesn't have to do, so I reminded him in front of the clerk that he still had property at my home and I wanted out of my house. The clerk told him that anything he leaves on my property after a certain date will legally belong to me, and there will be no way of getting it back without my express consent. He asked if he could work something out with me, and I told him no. You'll have to adhere to these legal guidelines, and anything left afterward will be forfeit. Now, while we were together, his blessed mother, may her soul rest in peace despite her son turning out to be worthless, passed. I loved that woman, she was a saint, and I wanted something of hers to remember her. He had inherited her dining rug. While not worth a lot monetarily, it is still a lovely black and red antique. And I knew he couldn't afford to ship it, nor could he afford to rent a moving truck, nor could he fit it in his girlfriend's tiny crap car. So while he was crying and loading up his mother's belongings, all of which he had left behind when he left initially, I told him I'm keeping the rug. I said this flatly and without feeling. He tried to argue, so I pointed out the obvious and he conceded. He knew I was right. That rug is one of my favorite belongings. I've begun renovating our unfinished basement, and it currently resides in a lovely guest room that houses my bookshelves, armoire, king-size bed, and 55-gallon fish tank that is not yet home to anything. And for even more good news, I married my best friend, and we've been together for nearly 4 blissful years. On our 5th anniversary, he has agreed to a ceremony, since we were married in a simple ceremony with only 2 witnesses. And for more petty revenge, I still have my ex's childhood art binder, which he cherishes. And I will continue to hold it until he pays me back the $400 he owes me for the brand new tires I put on his car a mere few weeks before he decided he wanted the divorce. It's been over 4 years, man. I'm never giving it back at this rate. And I do send him annual reminders. The next story is titled, Overheard Salesman Say I Wasn't Going to Buy Anything, Made Sure to Have Manager Take My Sale. In the late 90s, I was able, with the help of a family member, to get a job working at Macy's Herald Square. For this job, I was allowed to wear jeans and tops of the brand I was working for as a specialist, otherwise it was business attire. On this particular day, I was there for orientation, and we were given a lunch break to which I went walking around. I was 18, and having family working there, I wanted to do my best to look the part. So, I called my mother, and she said, walk around, pick what you like, and when I get off work, I'll buy it. So, I go look at suits, got some fitted, no problem. Problem comes when I go to the shoe department. I'm looking at all the shoes, and I'm overwhelmed. Lots of very expensive shoes and sneakers and whatnot. I'm looking for someone to help me, but to no avail. I see a salesman, and I ask him for help, and he ignores me. So a manager sees me and asked if I needed help. I said yes, I would like to see these shoes at my size. I tried them on and said thanks, I'll be by later. As I walk away, I hear the manager ask the salesman why he didn't help me, and he said I knew he wasn't going to buy anything. So I finished my lunch break and go about my day. Finished orientation and waited for my mother to arrive. We got the suits and were walking towards the shoe department. When this same guy walks up to my mother and says, "Hello, may I help you?" She's about to respond when I said, "No, we don't need your help. Bring me the manager who helped me before." My mom bought me 4 pairs of shoes. 2 being Coach because she had this obsession with the brand at the time. It came out to over $1,000 for shoes, and managers don't get commission. I asked the manager if he knew why I asked for him. He said, "Yes, I do." I told him I start working here tomorrow, so I'll make sure to come by and show you my shoes with the suit. He said, make sure to show him, the salesman, as well, since he missed out on the commission. The first story is titled, HOA Karen Pushed My Disabled Kid into Her Pool. Calls 911 for trespassing on her property. Moving to a new neighborhood can be both an exciting and nerve-wracking experience. As a mother, I was looking forward to raising my son in a peaceful and safe community. Little did I know that the peacefulness would be short-lived, as we were about to cross paths with a neighbor who would change our lives forever. We had just moved into our new home, and my son, who is 9 years old and nonverbal, was eager to explore the backyard. He loved spending time outside and kicking a ball around, so I felt comfortable allowing him to play while I made dinner. That's when I met her, our next-door neighbor, the president of the HOA board. She was friendly at first, but when she learned that my son had autism, her attitude changed. She went on a tirade about how people like us shouldn't be allowed to live in the neighborhood, and she even tried to change the HOA rules to keep us out. As a mother, it broke my heart to see the way she treated my son, who was innocent and just wanted to play. He communicated through modified sign language, and I did my best to teach him to be independent, but it wasn't always easy. One day, while my son was playing in the backyard, he kicked his ball over the fence into our neighbor's yard. I was cooking dinner and couldn't keep an eye on him the entire time, but I trusted that he could take care of himself. However, when I went to check on him, I found him in our neighbor's backyard with her screaming at him and calling him a retard. Before I could even reach my son, our neighbor pushed him into her pool. My heart sank as I saw my son struggling to stay afloat, unable to swim properly. I ran to the pool and pulled him out, his head bleeding from hitting the edge of the pool. Karen, as she liked to be called, had already called the police, claiming that my son had trespassed on her property. The police arrived and I explained what had happened. Karen, however, continued to deny that she had pushed my son into the pool. The police officer could see that Karen was in the wrong, and he called for an ambulance to take my son to the hospital. Karen was arrested later on when the police discovered other illegal activities that she was involved in. Months later, we received an update that Karen was now facing multiple charges and had been removed from her position as HOA president. She had also been ordered to pay a hefty fine for violating safety regulations in her backyard, which included having sharp rocks lining the edges of the pool. It turns out that she had a history of harassing and discriminating against neighbors, not just us. However, the consequences for Karen's actions did not end there. In fact, the whole ordeal had left a lasting impact on my son. He became more reserved and hesitant around new people, and I could see that the traumatic experience had affected him deeply. We decided to seek therapy for him to help him cope with the trauma, and it was during one of these sessions that we discovered something shocking. Karen was actually a licensed therapist herself, and her license was now under review due to her actions towards my son. The news was both surprising and devastating. How could someone who was supposed to help people be so cruel to a child? It was clear that Karen had serious issues and that her punishment was well-deserved. Despite everything that had happened, my son and I were grateful for the support we received from other neighbors who were more accepting and empathetic towards us. We continued to keep an even closer eye on him, and we made sure to always stand up for ourselves when facing discrimination. The experience had taught us a valuable lesson about the importance of standing up for what is right and the power of community support. We realized that no one deserves to be treated the way Karen treated us, and that we needed to speak out against discrimination to make a difference. We also decided to get more involved in our local community and participate in events and activities that brought people together. We met other families with children with disabilities and found comfort in the shared experiences and support. As time went by, my son began to regain his confidence and trust in others, and I felt proud of the progress he was making. We had come a long way since that traumatic day, and I was grateful for the lessons we had learned along the way. However, the story did not end there. A few months after Karen's punishment was announced, we received news that she had taken her own life. It was a shocking and sad revelation, and we couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt and responsibility for her death. Despite everything that she had done to us, we couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy towards her. We realized that Karen was a troubled person who needed help, and we regretted not being able to offer her the support she needed. The news of Karen's death was a reminder that we should never underestimate the impact of our actions on others. It was a tragic end to a story that had already taken so many unexpected turns, and it left us with a mix of emotions. In the end, we learned that life can be unpredictable and that we should always strive to be kind and empathetic towards others, no matter how different they may seem. We also learned that the power of community support can make a difference, and that standing up against discrimination is crucial in creating a more inclusive and accepting society. Although the experience was traumatic, we emerged stronger and more united than ever before. We were grateful for the support we received from our community and for the lessons we learned along the way. We knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with strength, resilience, and a commitment to making the world a better place for everyone. The next story is Entitled Neighbor Threatens Dogs and I Break. Years ago, my mother and I had just moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We had 2 dogs. One was a Bichon Shih Tzu, and the other is a Terrier-Poodle mix. Because of them, we were excited for the community dog park right next to our building. Also, to note, our whole building was filled with dog owners, each with dogs ranging from small to huge. Our apartment was on the first floor in the back of the building, all the way in the corner. It was a nice private area for us with how the apartments were situated. Since one of our dogs is a terrier, he can be a bit barky when we're not home. Though, when we are home, we have a clicker to get his attention, which he has been trained to stop barking and come to whoever has the clicker. Due to our work hours, I was usually home in the morning and Mom was home in the afternoon, leaving him alone for a few hours during the day. After a month of moving to our new apartment, we received a note on our door. It was from one of our neighbors. It stated, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you're new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mom turned in the note right away to the leasing office as she wasn't sure what to do with it. That is when the office told us not to worry because he had done this to every dog owner in the building. They did ask us to see if we can find ways to calm him down when we were not home, so we did. We found out the kids of the neighborhood liked playing with the power station outside our apartment, and that is who he had been barking at. So we closed off that area for him when we went out and no one was home. We started playing calming music as a way to help as well. Another week goes by, and this time we hear a knock at the door. We go outside and we meet our angry neighbor. He explains that our dog has kept him up every day and woke him up with his hours of barking. Both of us had been home that day, and our dog had been a good boy and had not had excessive barking. I still remember what he had told us when I explained that. I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, then I am going to call animal control and have them both taken from you. I did it before and have no problem getting rid of your dogs too. Then I'll get you kicked out for not following your lease, and I can do that because I'm very rich and the apartment needs my money. So do something to shut your dogs up or else. After that, and my mom apologizing for what had happened, we went back in. A few moments later, I walked out to get the mail and discovered from another neighbor that he had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. After some convincing, my mom told the apartment what had happened. We were told not to worry, and if he did that again, to please contact them. We also found out that the apartment had offered him an apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined since the dogs were the problem and not him. However, with what he had done, my mom began to show signs of anxiety and bought a lemon spray bark collar for our dog. While I didn't like this idea, it had put her at ease to go outside of our apartment. We did make sure to only put it on him when we both were not home. A month went by peacefully, then once again, we got a knock on our door. This time, it was animal control. They had gotten an anonymous report of a dog being abused and neglected in our home. They explained that someone has said that our dogs were barking because of neglect. My mom invited the AC lady inside and explained the situation. We showed her everything we could to prevent our dogs from being taken away. The nice lady noticed how playful and happy our dogs were and figured it was another false call. She explained that they had gotten a few of those from an anonymous concerned neighbor for other apartments in this building. The AC lady left, telling us that if they are threatening again to try and get it on record. This event had turned my mom into a paranoid person who became afraid to leave the house, thinking that if she did, then she would lose her pups. Normally, I'm the calmest person in my family, never really letting anyone get to me, but this neighbor had done this to hurt us. So, I did my research and discovered a few things that could legally help us. With new information on certain laws and leasing terms, I formed a plan. During a weekend that my mom was visiting my aunt in a different state, I began my plan. I started it by printing out a few things and then sat outside with my phone and a speaker. I began to play a video of a dog barking really loud. I had figured out which apartment was his thanks to a few neighbors who were also tired of being harassed. I sat there looking across the courtyard to where his apartment was. I waited with a huge smile on my face, and as I hoped for, he stormed out and headed over to where I was. I turned off my video and turned on my recorder without him noticing. His face is red with anger as he looks at me sitting there with a smile. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I ask him. "Duck you. I told you what I will do to your family if you didn't stop your dumb mutt from ruining my sleep. Now I'm going to get them taken from you and get you kicked out for not doing as I said. I gave you a ducking chance. I hope when they take your dogs that they are killed and you and your mom live inside a cardboard box." I give him a fake, "oh dear" look and say, "So you're saying that I am not allowed to make loud noises, including my dogs barking, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m.? And that I went against the law by doing so? You know you did. And you're telling me this from my porch at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office." "Oh noes. That is a very serious threat for my dogs and my family, isn't it?" "Duck, yes it is." I give him a huge smile and turn off my recorder from my phone. The neighbor is confused now, and I ask him to have a seat. I have a few things to show him. I pull out my papers and hand him the first one. It was the county's noise ordinance laws. In our county, a dog's bark was considered the same amount of sound as a loud appliance, so they can bark between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could talk, I pull out another paper. This one states that it is against the leasing terms to threaten another neighbor, and after one warning that the apartment complex has the right to revolt their lease. He looks at me with an understanding of what he had done now. I silence him and pull out one last paper. This one was another leasing term I had found. This face, after reading this one, had made him turn white. This last one talked about how it was a complete violation of leasing terms to go onto another renter's property and threaten them or their property. This includes the renter's outdoor area. Those found guilty of this violation will have their lease revoked immediately and be forced to leave the apartment within a set time. The scared look on his face was priceless as I silently got up and walked back into my apartment. After he finally left, I called my leasing office and explained what had just happened and agreed to email the recording to them right away. A week later, my mom came home with some news that she had learned from the leasing office. The man had been evicted from his apartment and would be leaving later that week. I found out that my actions had caused the other dog owners of the building to come forward and admit what he had been doing to all of them. After that, there was never another complaint, and I threw away the lemon spray collar. My mom still gets anxiety attacks once in a while, but has been getting help to ease those worries. As for me, I don't regret what I did. I just feel bad that it had to come to this. The last story is titled, "My Pregnant Ex Keeps Trying to Move Into My Apartment." This is not my story, this is my friend's story that I'm posting for him because he doesn't have a Reddit and wants people to hear about this. Also for convenience, I'm going to write this in first-person POV because pronouns are hard to keep up with. Everything here is approved by my friend. So I, 21M, have an ex, Angelica, 20F. Angelica and I had an on and off relationship since we were about 15, but got serious when COVID hit, and I had to move back to my hometown. We got an apartment together, and very soon after, she started spending a lot of time with her cousin. Long story short, she's boning her cousin. We break up. We've been broken up 9 months at this point. For 7 of those months, her phone has been on my phone bill, and she owes me over $500. Fine, whatever. I'll never see that $500, and she always makes excuses to not pay me back. That's life, my own fault for letting her keep using me as a cash cow. She also took my car when we broke up, and I let her because I was too afraid she would try to take my apartment too. Anyway, it's 9 months past our breakup. I get a message. "Hey, I'm pregnant." I'm on my way home from work, so I don't respond. That is 9 months past being my problem. It is not my baby. She messages me again. "My boyfriend, the one she cheated on me with, and I have nowhere to stay." Still 9 months past my problem. Angelica has never worked a day in her life. She lives off the disability check from her boyfriend and spends it 99% on weed and fast food. She never paid rent and is documented to never pay rent. Anyway, she tells me, my name is still on the lease. We're going to move in September. I tell her, your name is not on the lease. It was renewed last month and I took your name off. I'm sorry. She messages me calling me an asshole and saying she's moving in because she has nowhere for her baby and 3 dogs to stay. Mind you, my apartment is more like a studio and barely fits me, let alone 2 other people and 3 dogs. I tell her it's not happening. I'm moving out of town soon anyway. Also, come pick up her crap that she's left at my apartment for 9 months. She says no, and if I throw it away, she's going to press charges. I tell her it doesn't matter because when I move, I'm throwing it away. She later called my landlord and told him I was planning to move out. I got upset at this and told her I ran the numbers on the car, it's still in my name. Get the car out of my name now or I'm repossessing it, or she can leave me the duck alone. She started bawling on a call asking how I could do this to her and her unborn child, and I was condemning her and her child to be homeless. She also still has a gun in my name that I told her to give back or I'm calling the cops. I'm really considering repossessing the car since it was mine from the start and is still in my name. She doesn't deserve to get a free car handed to her. She needs to wake up. She keeps saying she needs a place to stay. I'm ruining her and her baby's life. It's literally my apartment that she has never once paid rent on. I don't know how she thinks she's entitled to just live in my apartment with the guy she cheated on me with and 3 dogs. I hope the baby ends up okay. It's not its fault its mother is a spoiled brat, but I also hope being homeless and carless wakes her the duck up. Tiny update, my friend said his ex is coming to pick up her crap tomorrow and return the gun. If he gets shot, I'll let you guys know, I guess. Update, her and her boyfriend, fake cousin, came to his, my friend's, apartment, returned the gun, and picked up her crap. Her boyfriend then proceeded to wave his own gun around and demand to be put back on the lease. Not how that works. My friend called the cops, they booked it out of there before the cops arrived. I'm not sure about the rest. Final update, phone is not on the phone bill, her stuff is out of his apartment, his gun is returned, dog is in his possession, still no car. He said it's not worth it at this point. My friend asked for no charges, so I doubt anything will happen. He said he's cutting her out of his life, no contact. I'm personally upset about the car, but nothing to do about it now. The next story is titled,
Even Tinkerbell has had enough. This is an old story, but it just popped into my head while I was hunting through videos on YouTube. So I figured I'd post it. This is an old story, and I can't remember exactly how all the conversations went. So they're pretty much my recollection. Years ago, shortly after I had left the service, my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved in together, halfway across the U.S. from both our respective families. Long stories from another time. And to a place where we both had friends as a result of our military travels. One of my wife's friends, we'll call her Anna, had gotten married in the intervening years since they had last been together and was in the process of a divorce since her husband had knocked up the checkout girl at the local orchard. She had left the home, a single wide trailer, important later, that they owned, left the car they owned, which she had solely paid for and was still in her name, moved back in with her parents, and got a second job. She already worked at a large big box retail establishment. Of course, my wife and I commiserated with her on multiple occasions about how poorly she had been treated. Anna made a remark at one point about missing her bills that month. My wife asked, "What bills?" "You live with your parents, you have 2 jobs, no credit cards, and you never do anything expensive. What could you possibly owe anyone money for?" Turns out that she had a checking account still linked to her ex-husband's account, and when he decided not to pay the mortgage or car payment, they simply took it out of her account, marked the loan current, and went on with their lives. Shortly after the divorce, he would make most payments, but for the last year or so, he hasn't made a single one. So ex-hubby has perfect credit because he never misses a payment, and Anna's credit is in the toilet because she is constantly late on her own bills. Anna may have 2 jobs and not a lot of bills, cell phone, car payment, insurance. When she's making someone else's mortgage and car payments as well, she's pretty much broke, and that's why she never does anything expensive. And has to have me change your oil in my gravel driveway because she can't afford $20 for Jiffy Lube. I asked her why she didn't close the account and go somewhere else. Anna's answer, but if they miss their payments, the bank will take their house and their car, and they have a baby. I can't do that to them. I did the Forrest Whitaker eye. Then I said, they're taking advantage of you pretty badly. They've established that you'll pay all their bills for them, and they can do whatever the hell they want because you'll never force the sale of the house or the car. If I had an option to pay my bills or pass it off to someone I don't like, I'd let them do it every time. He's paying an electric bill and getting a free house, car, and everything else. And I guarantee you that he's handing these bills to the social worker and claiming he can't afford to live. So they'll give him WIC, food stamps, and everything else. You're funding the lifestyle of an a-hole who cheated on you and a woman who knew he was married because every time she came over, she made him take your wedding pictures down. So she didn't have to look at you while she screwed your husband. You're paying bills for a guy who is so dumb that he thought he could get a woman pregnant he wasn't even married to, and to a woman who thought if she had an orgasm before she came over to sleep with your husband while you were at work, her egg would be gone, and she couldn't get pregnant. The dumb bitch was using a sex toy as birth control. You see, I may not give a rip about most of my family, but you do not duck with my friends. She gives it some thought, and a couple of days later asks for some help out of this. I took her to the bank to get an account the next day. She moves her direct deposit, withdraws her money, and closes her old account. The next month, ex-hubby's bills don't get paid. We're watching a movie when he calls. She spends an hour in a screaming match with him, telling him to pay his own bills. She has been charitable enough, and he and his new wife can pay for their own crap. Then the penny drops. Remember earlier when I said the house was a trailer? Anna has been paying the mortgage on the trailer, but not the rent for the lot it's on. They never had her checking account. This entitled prick has been assuming she's been paying that too. She assumed he had. He hasn't even figured out what's coming yet. He's calling because he's pissed off she hasn't paid the lot rent in forever, and he's being told to pay up, move his trailer, or they'll do it and hold the trailer in arrears until the bill for moving it is paid. He's calling to ask her for another $6,000, or they'll lose the home they both love so much. Now, up until this moment, Anna had been this sweet, wonderful gumdrop of a person, the type of person that it should be legal to slap if they're encountered before 9 a.m. The relentlessly sunny person that you send into the room to cheer up Tinkerbell. In the better part of a year, I haven't heard this woman say a bad thing about anybody. Up until tonight, until this guy called to complain that she hadn't been paying enough of his bills. And she loses her mind. She lights into this guy that he'd better figure it out because he's not getting another penny from her ever again. And while he's figuring out who to beg, borrow, or steal that money from, he may want to get a little extra since he's about to get the overdue notices for the house and the car too. He starts screaming so loudly I can hear what he's calling her from across the room. Before she calmly hits the end button, flips the phone over, pops the battery out, sets them both down on the table, hits play on the VCR, morphs back into a normally sunny self, and offers to make popcorn. Monday morning, she went to the lawyer, filed a no-contact order, filed for bankruptcy, her credit was already a mess, and there were bills with her name on. She didn't want that splatter all over her, and called the dealer that owned her car note, told her she couldn't make the payments anymore, and offers them a voluntary repossession, has them bring out their tow truck, and meets the driver with the keys and the paperwork. Signs the forms, asks the driver oh so sweetly to drop her off at her parents' house on the way back to the dealer, and waves at her ex from the passenger seat of the tow truck as he comes running out of the trailer wearing only a towel. Over the course of the next month or two, he lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. His wife had to go back to weighing pears at the orchard. Turns out she'd left her job when Anna was paying for everything, and sell his record collection. which was what he had been spending his money on while someone else was paying for everything. On the bright side, I picked up the original vinyl copies of Abbey Road and Yellow Submarine for a total of $5 because his idiot wife running their yard sale didn't understand why the old crappy records were worth anything anyway. And that's how Tinkerbell burned some entitled a-hole's life to the ground. The next story is titled, "My HOA Neighbor Illegally Trespasses on My Property to Steal Water for Their Unapproved Pool." A few years ago, my family and I decided to go on a much-needed vacation to visit some relatives. Before we left, I made sure to double-check everything in the house, from the locks on the doors to the windows. I had no idea that one of the last things I checked, the spigot in the backyard, would be the one thing that would be the cause of the biggest headache of my life. Our neighbor was an obnoxious and entitled person, always thinking that the world revolved around him. Whenever he saw us outside, he would come over and start talking about himself, boasting about his achievements and making it clear that he was superior to us in every way. I tried my best to avoid him, but it wasn't easy when he lived right next door. The weekend we were gone, our neighbor saw an opportunity to take advantage of us. He used a hose from our backyard spigot to fill his in-ground pool and an extension cord from our outlet to power his backyard. He didn't care that it was illegal or that it was stealing. He just wanted to save some money on his water and electric bill. He didn't think he would get caught, but he was wrong. When we returned from our vacation, I noticed that the grass in our backyard had a large dent in it, and something told me to check our security cameras. When I did, I was furious. There he was, my neighbor, trespassing onto my property, stealing my water and electricity, and acting like he owned the place. I decided to call the police and report him for trespassing and theft. The police came and gave him a warning for trespassing and said that he would have to pay for the water and electricity that he used that weekend. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to get revenge on him for what he had done. I remembered him boasting to me before about how he had installed his pool without permits to avoid paying fees and how it was not up to safety standards. That's when I had an idea. I decided to call my HOA and report my neighbor's pool for violating safety guidelines. The HOA promptly investigated and they found several safety violations, including the lack of a permanent ladder, being too close to the back doors, and failing to cover the pool when not in use. As it turns out, my neighbor had not followed the HOA rules for private pools. The HOA informed him that he would have to remove the entire pool, and he had to pay a fine for building it without permits. He was left with a big hole in his backyard filled with dirt and a severely damaged property value. My neighbor was livid, and he soon moved away, but not before he threatened to get revenge on me. For months, I lived in fear that my neighbor would come back and try to get revenge on me. I didn't know what he was capable of, and I didn't want to find out. But as time went on, I realized my fear was unfounded. My neighbor never came back, and I was able to relax and enjoy my life without worrying about him. As an update, a few years after my neighbor moved, a new family moved in. They were friendly and courteous, and we became good friends. The new neighbor always respected my boundaries and privacy, and I appreciated their thoughtful approach to being good neighbors. One day, the new neighbors invited me over to their backyard to show me something. When I got there, I was surprised to see they had installed a beautiful swimming pool. It was clear they had gone through all the proper channels to get the necessary permits, and it was up to safety standards. As we sat around the pool sipping drinks and enjoying the sunshine, I couldn't help but feel grateful for my new neighbors. They had reminded me that not all neighbors are difficult, and it's always better to resolve issues through proper channels. Like the HOA, as we talked, my new neighbor revealed that they had a run-in with our old neighbor before they moved in. They had heard that he had installed a pool without permits, and they had reported him to the HOA, but they didn't know how serious the situation was until they moved in and saw the big hole in the ground in the old neighbor's backyard. They were shocked that someone would go to such lengths to avoid paying fees. As we continued to talk, I noticed that my new neighbor seemed to be getting upset. When I asked what was wrong, he told me that he had received a threatening letter from our old neighbor. The letter stated that he knew about the HOA report and that he would get revenge on them for reporting him. I immediately called the police, and they took the letter as evidence. They told us that they would investigate, but we didn't hear anything for weeks. We started to worry that our old neighbor was up to something. We didn't know what to do. One day, while I was at work, I received a call from my new neighbor. He was frantic, and he told me that he had heard a noise in his backyard. He had gone to investigate, and he found that someone had cut the power to his house. He was terrified that our old neighbor was trying to hurt him, and he didn't know what to do. I rushed over to his house, and we called the police. They arrived quickly, and we found that someone had cut the power line to my neighbor's house. They couldn't be sure who did it, but they suspected that it was our old neighbor. They told us to be careful and to call them if we noticed anything suspicious. For weeks, we lived in fear that our old neighbor was going to come after us. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, and we didn't feel safe in our own homes. But eventually, the police caught our old neighbor, and he was charged with trespassing, theft, and criminal mischief. He was sentenced to prison, and we finally felt safe again. As an update, my new neighbor and I have become even closer since that incident. We all realize that having good neighbors is important, and we look out for each other. We have formed a neighborhood watch, and we make sure that everyone in the neighborhood feels safe and secure. In the end, the incident with our old neighbor taught us that it's always better to resolve issues through proper channels, and that having good neighbors is essential. We also learned that sometimes people are willing to go to great lengths to avoid paying fees, and it's important to be vigilant. But most of all, we learned that when we work together, we can overcome even the most challenging situations. The next story is titled, EM Demands Nurse Make Me Cover My Tattoo That's Scaring Her Sleeping Child. I'm in the ER waiting room, and an EM comes in with her deathly ill child that's fast asleep in her arms. I'm wearing a tank top and have a Spirited Away theme piece on my upper arm. I've been here for 2 hours already. EM keeps looking my way, huffing, dramatic sighs, and dirty looks. I have no interest in engaging, so I continue to ignore her. Finally, she stops a nurse and says, "You need to tell that person to cover that awful offensive tattoo." Nurse gives a blank stare. EM continues, "It's scaring my child. He's traumatized." Nurse looks at me. I meet her gaze out of the corner of my eye. She looks down at EM and tells her to wait outside or in her car if she had a problem. EM keeps saying how traumatized her child is. She's woken him up now from her yelling. She tells security that I need to move or cover up my horrific arm, or she's going to call the cops for indecent exposure. At this point, everyone is fed up. Security tells her to quiet down and take a seat or leave. Final warning. At this point, I'm laughing. Long story short, she tried to call the cops. An officer was already here. He poked his head in to look at me, then walked back out. Said something to her, and she left screaming bloody murder about indecent exposure to my poor child. I'm still currently in the waiting room. The last story is titled, Why is Only Some of the Wine Free to Taste? The premium wines should also be free. In this wine region, if you go to cellar doors, you can get wine tastings that are free. Hit up a bunch of wineries, and it's a good day. Some cellars may have a premium range, which they ask for a small fee to sample, but there will be other wines you can taste for free. Any place that charges you a fee will refund the fee if you buy any wine. Went to a well-known place and tasted about 10 wines for free. They had a premium dessert range, and if I wanted to sample that, it would be $10. I'm not into sweets, so I skipped that even though I was buying other wine. The other random couple were already there before we arrived for our tasting. They had been low-key arguing with a staff member the entire time we were there and walked through 10 wines, and who knows how long before we arrived. I was buying some wine, so approached the register near the couple. Karen and the couple was very insistent on sampling the premium dessert wines, but did not want to pay. Sweet wines are my absolute favorite, so I will definitely buy a lot of bottles, so you should give me a free tasting anyway." The very patient staff member was repeatedly explaining that the $10 would immediately be credited to any wine purchase. I left Karen still arguing with staff. She could have hit another nearby winery and tasted a dozen wines in the time she took to argue over $10. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.